William Shakespeare has left an incredibly rich legacy to our language and literature. He wrote some 37 plays, 154 exquisite 14-line poems called sonnets, and 2 long narrative verses as well, The Rape of Lucrece and Venus and Adonis. It's reckoned that Shakespeare had a vocabulary of 20,000 words, of which 1,700 were being used in English for the first time by Shakespeare. And many of his inventions enrich our everyday speech. For instance, we talk about someone to the manner born, or in my salad days when I was green in judgment. If there's something we don't understand, it's all Greek to me, and if it's complete nonsense, then it has neither rhyme nor reason. We can be cruel to be kind, have too much of a good thing, refuse to budge an inch, and be made of sterner stuff. A good friend is a tower of strength, but an unwelcome visitor is likely to eat us out of house and home. Let's hope soon he will vanish into thin air. And just to make sure he does, Shakespeare has given us some wonderful insults, so you can try out a few of these on your friends. Thou art a boil, a plague sore. Thou damned and luxurious mountain goat. Thou lump of foul deformity. Cream-faced loon, threadbare juggler, red-tailed bumblebee, elvish-marked abortive rooting hog, poisonous bunchbacked toad, and my favourite, bloodsucker of sleeping men. Hello, my name is Tim Hudson. I'm an actor and I'm a London and Heart of England Blue Badge Guide. And for many years now, I've been fortunate in leading select travel study groups to Stratford Upon Avon, the birthplace of the greatest dramatic poet in the English language. So please come with me. I'd like to introduce you to Shakespeare's Stratford. We begin our exploration of Stratford Upon Avon here in the Bancroft Gardens in front of the basin of the Stratford Canal at the Gower Memorial, designed by Lord Ronald Gower in 1888, which depicts Shakespeare surrounded by characters from his plays. And representing philosophy is the gloomy Dane himself, Hamlet, Prince of Denmark, contemplating the skull of the jester Yorick. Alas, poor Yorick! I knew him, Horatio, a fellow of infinite jest, of most excellent fancy. And representing the comedies is the fat knight, Sir John Falstaff, who boasts, I am not only witty in myself, but the cause of wit that is in other men. And from the same play, Henry IV, Part 2, is Prince Hal trying on his father's crown, representing the history plays, whilst representing tragedy is Lady Macbeth, seen here constantly washing her hands to try and eradicate any trace of the blood spilt by the saintly King Duncan when he's murdered by her husband. Out, damned spot, out, I say! And if you read the whole of that speech, it lasts approximately 20 seconds, which is why it was chosen by the World Health Organization to front a campaign advising people to wash their hands properly during the coronavirus pandemic. But the story of Shakespeare really begins here at the house in Henley Street, traditionally said to be his birthplace. It's a timber-framed building of wattle and daub construction. Can you see here the lattice of hazel twigs? That's the wattle, and the daub, which is a mixture of dung and horsehair, which provides the infill, and then the whole structure is lime-washed. And it was here that John Shakespeare, the poet's father, set up shop. He was a wittowar, or a craftsman who dealt in kid leather and made high-quality garments. Now, there are costume guides in all the rooms here which really bring the place alive and tell the Shakespeare story, and you'll be shown the birth room where Shakespeare is reputed to have been born on the 23rd of April 1564. The truth is, we don't really know the exact date on which he was born. We know he was baptized on the 26th because of the baptismal record at Holy Trinity Church. And that normally happened within 3 days of birth. St. George's Day is also the 23rd of April, so maybe that's a happy coincidence. The Saint's Day for our patron saint, and the birthday of our great national poet. Now, after Shakespeare's death, for a time, his sister Joan Hart and her descendants lived in the house, and then it really fell into unfortunate hands. Two proprietors who were a bit unscrupulous, selling off bits of furniture and carving up the woodwork to sell as souvenirs. So the house faced an uncertain future until it was saved by a national campaign led by, amongst others, the great novelist Charles Dickens. And in 1847, it was purchased at auction and the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust was born. And it rapidly became a great place of pilgrimage, as it is to this day. And after your visit, you'll emerge into some lovely gardens where you'll be entertained by actors who ingeniously managed to recite Shakespeare's greatest hits on request. Although don't be too hard on them, they might not be able to give a perfect rendition of Cymbeline, Act 5, Scene 3. Stratford can boast many other fine historic houses, among them these 15th century almshouses, which are still used by elderly residents of Stratford to this day. And now you see the gracious town hall dating from the 18th century with a fine statue of Shakespeare, which was the gift of David Garrick, the great actor. And it was David Garrick who organised the Stratford Jubilee in September 1769, which was instrumental in putting Stratford upon Avon on the map and establishing its legacy as a great place of pilgrimage. And Shakespeare's reputation was also bolstered by the fact that Garrick reintroduced the tragic endings to the plays. It had been the custom to give plays like King Lear a happy ending, or Romeo and Juliet, where Juliet wakes up just in time to prevent the suicide of Romeo over her apparent corpse. But it was Garrick who ensured that he was faithful to the original intentions of the playwright. And he innovated in other ways too. A word we take for granted in the theatre is prop, but it comes originally from property of the Theatre Royal. So all of those handy swords or walking sticks, hats and gloves which actors used to enliven their performances were fair game for souvenir hunters. And when Garrick was the licensee at Drury Lane in London, he ensured they were stamped property of the Theatre Royal to prevent them going missing. And if you're in need of food and drink, why not repair to the Old Thatched Tavern, which is the only thatched building in the town centre. It's a very old inn dating from 1470, and it has the added attraction of being haunted by the ghost of Joseph Pinfield, murdered here on Christmas Day, 1795. Here's a house with a strong American connection, Harvard House. It dates from 1596. You can just see the date above the windows there. And on either side, carved into this wooden facade, Thomas Rogers and his wife Alice Rogers, T-R-A-R. These were the parents of Catherine Rogers, who married a man called Robert Harvard, a butcher from Southwark in London. This was Catherine's childhood home, but when she married, she moved and later had a son, John Harvard, who emigrated to Massachusetts, shortly to die of tuberculosis, but not before he'd endowed the college, which now bears his name, with his library and a bequest of £750, an enormous sum at that time. And now here is the Guild Hall. It was the Guild of the Holy Cross which established the chapel you can see here in 1269, and later on the Guild Hall became the headquarters of the Stratford Borough Council. And it was here probably that William Shakespeare went to school, in the first floor schoolroom. Shakespeare gives us a wonderful portrait of a schoolboy in his play, As You Like It, the whining schoolboy with his satchel and shining morning face, creeping like snail, unwillingly to school. And no wonder, because it was quite a hard regime in those days, 6 a.m. till 8 p.m, everything had to be learned by rote, and young boys would slavishly learn the works of classical writers like Horace, Virgil, Cicero, and Ovid, which recur frequently in Shakespeare's adult plays. We say he was educated here. Again, we don't know for sure. It's likely he went to the only decent grammar school in the town because his father John had risen to the post of bailiff or mayor of Stratford in 1569. Other Shakespeare properties include this house, Thomas Nash's house on the left, which was the home of the husband of Shakespeare's granddaughter Elizabeth, the last of his descendants who lived until 1670. And next to it, you can see a sturdy gate with the coat of arms of William Shakespeare, and behind it, a very elegant garden, the great garden of New Place. New Place was Shakespeare's retirement home. He purchased it in 1597. But there's nothing to show you now, thanks to a later owner of the property, the Reverend Francis Gastrell, who in 1759, first of all chopped down the mulberry trees said to have been planted by Shakespeare, and then demolished the house itself, fed up of having to answer the door to yet another tourist. Many other fine memorials in Stratford include one with an American connection. Here is the Shakespeare Memorial Fountain, which was the gift of George William Childs from Philadelphia in 1887. But more recent is this stainless steel sculpture beneath it of two swans, which was made by Christine Lee to commemorate the 800th anniversary of Stratford's founding charter in 1196. But my favourite statue is this one at the top of Henley Street, called The Jester by James Butler. And it portrays Touchstone, or perhaps Feste, or even Yorick, Shakespeare's fools, who contribute so much to his profound understanding of the human condition. The fool doth think he is wise, but the wise man knows himself to be a fool. Touchstone's comment in As You Like It. But the play's the thing. And now we come to the Royal Shakespeare Theatre, astride the River Avon. Oh, for a muse of fire that would ascend the brightest heaven of invention, a kingdom for a stage, princes to act, and monarchs to behold the swelling scene. Well, I was very privileged as a young actor to appear on stage here at the earlier theatre, the Royal Shakespeare Theatre, designed by Elizabeth Scott, a woman architect. In fact, this was one of the first major public buildings by a woman, built in the Art Deco style, opened in 1932. But it had a vast barn-like auditorium and famously bad acoustic. It could seat 1,400 people, but they felt very far away from the actors. So it was a bit like acting in Dover to an audience in Calais. I must just tell you this story. I was performing in Hamlet with Kenneth Branagh. I was Marcellus, and Horatio was with us. And the ghost of Hamlet's father, you may remember, urges Hamlet and his friends to avenge his death. And so the voice of the ghost in this rather sepulchral tone, swear, swear, sounding on all sides, and Hamlet and the others join him right at the forefront of the stage, with the audience only a few feet in front of us, and just as Hamlet extends his hands and we put out ours to meet his, suddenly from beneath the stage up shoots the hand of the ghost himself in a moment reminiscent of the movie Carrie. It was great stuff. I've never seen the whole front row of the audience levitate in the way they did then. A great memory. Well, that, of course, was the earlier theatre, but in 2010, there was a major transformation. At the cost of £112 million, the theatre was completely revamped, and this observation tower, 118 feet high, was created, and state-of-the-art modern facilities. And now the theatre has a thrust stage, so the audience are on three sides and much closer to the actors. It seats about 1,040 people. But the RSC, whose headquarters is at Stratford, boasts two other theatres. This, you can see, is the remnant of the 1879 Victorian Gothic Theatre, the Shakespeare Memorial Theatre it was called, which tragically burned down in 1926. It was built originally 1879. But in the shell of the building in 1986, the Swan Theatre was made. and you can see it beneath its conical hat there. It has a galleried auditorium, seats 450, and is presenting the plays of Shakespeare and his contemporaries, but also other world writers too. And finally, the other place, which was opened in 2016, that's the RSC Studio Theatre, and it includes great rehearsal rooms as well. And now, doing art is thirsty work, so you might well feel a drink is called for after the show, and you'll spill into Stratford's most famous pub, the Black Swan, better known as the Dirty Duck, and it's where the actors hang out too. So you'll shortly be joined by a lot of thespians, and you'll see their glossy 10x8 photographs adorning the walls above the bar. After a few drinks, you might like to saunter through these delightful gardens owned by the Royal Shakespeare Company. And on the way, you'll pass the summer house, which once belonged to the residents of the Flowers Brewing dynasty, who formerly owned the land, but now is graced by these fine photographs of former RSC productions. And from time to time, you'll see these memorial tablets remembering great stars of yesteryear. And this one recalls a lass unparalleled, Scarlett O'Hara, Vivian Leigh, who appeared with her then husband Laurence Olivier in Macbeth at Stratford in 1955. Now, I should say it's very unlucky to actually express the name of the play in the theatre. If you do, as I did, then you'll have to make amends by spitting on the ground, turning around, exiting the theatre whistling, and then knocking 3 times on the door in order to be readmitted. And finally, you'll come to Holy Trinity Church, which Shakespeare would have known very well, although he wouldn't have recognised the steeple, which was added in 1763. But the earliest parts of the church date from 1210. And it was here that Shakespeare frequently worshipped and was eventually interred on the 25th of April in 1616. Now, we don't know exactly when he died, but it's generally thought it was on the 23rd of April because people were normally buried within a couple of days of their death. The 23rd happens also to be the birthday of William Shakespeare, albeit 52 years earlier. So there's a pleasing kind of symmetry if Shakespeare was born and died on the same day. And it's also the day, of course, of the patron saint of England, St. George. It's celebrated in Stratford by a great procession through the town. And this funeral monument, which was paid for by Shakespeare's wife, Anne Hathaway, not to be confused with the movie star, has Shakespeare, rather sunburned Shakespeare, thought to be a good likeness as it was paid for by his wife, however, holds a quill pen which is renewed every year on his birthday. If you've time, then why not visit some of the other Shakespeare houses, including Hall's Croft, which was the home of Shakespeare's daughter Susanna and her husband, Dr. John Hall, an eminent physician. He published one of the most celebrated medical treatises available, Select Observations on English Bodies, and he used a lot of herbs in his preparations, which he found in his garden, growing there still today. And just a mile away at Shottery is this famous thatched cottage, Anne Hathaway's cottage. Picture postcard perfect. This was the childhood home of Shakespeare's wife and her family, dating from 1463. And just beneath it, you can see a photograph of Mary Arden's house. 3 miles away at Wilmcote lived Mary Arden, the mother of William Shakespeare. And her house is now part of a working farm where you can see some attractive animals, Tamworth pigs, some Cotswold sheep, and also a museum of countryside crafts. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I leave you with this distant prospect of Shakespeare's Stratford, the Royal Shakespeare Theatre and the basin of the Stratford Canal, Shakespeare's birthplace, and his resting place, Holy Trinity Church. It's been a pleasure guiding you virtually around Stratford, and I hope one day to do it in person, maybe taking you into the town across the old Clopton Bridge, which was built in 1492 and still conveys traffic into the town to this day. And here in front of it swim on the River Avon the swans. In the words of Ben Jonson, William Shakespeare, sweet swan of Avon, was not of an age, but for all time.